High above the clouds, where most people need oxygen masks just to breathe normally, there's a country that most folks can't even pronounce correctly. It's called Kyrgyzstan. That is Kyrgyzstan for those keeping score, and it's about to blow your mind in ways you never expected. While everyone's obsessing over Thailand's beaches or Italy's pasta, this landlocked gem sits quietly in Central Asia, hiding secrets that would make Indiana Jones jealous. Right now, as you're watching this, there are eagle hunters gliding across mountain peaks with birds of prey that could easily mistake your head for a small rabbit. There are nomads living in felt tents called yurts, who can survive winters that would send a polar bear running for the nearest heater. And there are women so naturally stunning that international modeling agencies are starting to take notice. But more on that later, because we're just getting started. This isn't another travel video about overpriced tourist traps or Instagram-perfect cafes. This is about a country where adventure doesn't cost your entire life savings, where authentic culture hasn't been packaged and sold to the highest bidder, and where you can live like royalty on what most people spend on coffee in a month. But before you start booking flights, you need to know what you're really getting into, because Kyrgyzstan doesn't mess around when it comes to showing you the real deal. The first thing that hits you about Kyrgyzstan is not the altitude, though at 3,000 meters above sea level in some places, you'll definitely feel that too. It's the sheer impossibility of the landscape. We're talking about a country where 90% of the territory is mountains. Not rolling hills or gentle slopes, but proper, jaw-dropping, how is this even real, mountains that make the Alps look like speed bumps. The Tian Shan mountain range cuts through this country like nature's own highway system, creating valleys so perfect they look like someone's desktop wallpaper. These aren't just pretty backdrops either. They're the reason Kyrgyzstan exists as it does today. For over 1,000 years, these mountains served as natural highways for the Silk Road, where caravans loaded with spices, silk, and stories traveled between China and Europe. The same routes that Marco Polo used are still there, except now they're populated by shepherds with smartphones instead of merchants with camels. But here's where it gets interesting. While geography textbooks love to call Kyrgyzstan the Switzerland of Central Asia, which sounds impressive until you realize that Switzerland fits into Kyrgyzstan almost 3 times, the comparison falls apart pretty quickly. Switzerland is all organized efficiency and expensive everything. Kyrgyzstan is more like Switzerland's wild cousin who dropped out of college to become a professional adventure guide and never looked back. Take Lake Issyk-Kul, for instance. This isn't just any lake, it's the second largest alpine lake in the world, stretching over 170 kilometers long and sitting pretty at 1,600 meters above sea level. The name literally means warm lake in Kyrgyz, and here's the kicker. It never freezes. Ever. Even when the surrounding mountains are buried under snow that would make Siberia jealous, this lake stays liquid thanks to its salinity and depth. Swimming in Issyk-Kul is like having your own private sea, except the nearest ocean is about 2,000 kilometers away. The Soviets figured out this geography thing pretty quickly when they rolled into town in the 1920s. They took one look at all these mountains and valleys and thought, perfect place for a summer retreat. Soon enough, Issyk-Kul became the Soviet Union's premier vacation destination. Picture Communist Party officials lounging on beaches while their citizens back in Moscow were queuing for bread. The irony wasn't lost on locals, but they learned to roll with it. Literally, since tourism became a major part of the economy. Then there's Song-Kul Lake, sitting at 3,016 meters above sea level like nature's own penthouse suite. This isn't a place where you casually drop by for the afternoon. Getting to Song-Kul requires commitment, decent lung capacity, and a healthy respect for altitude sickness. But once you're there, you're essentially on top of the world, surrounded by nothing but sky, water, and the occasional eagle wondering what the hell you're doing in its neighborhood. The thing about Kyrgyz geography is that it forces a certain type of lifestyle on people. You can't exactly build shopping malls and suburbs when half your country is vertical. Instead, you get communities that have mastered the art of living with nature rather than despite it. Villages tucked into valleys where the main sound is water rushing down from glaciers. Towns where everyone knows everyone because there are only so many people crazy enough to live at that altitude. Modern Bishkek, the capital, sits in one of the few flat areas in the entire country, and even it's surrounded by mountains on all sides like nature's own security system. The city planners clearly had a sense of humor when they laid out the streets in a perfect Soviet grid system, as if mountains care about your urban planning theories. Walking down the main boulevard, you'll see Soviet-era buildings standing next to traditional bazaars with snow-capped peaks visible at the end of every street like nature's own exclamation points. This geography also explains why Kyrgyzstan never really bothered with intensive agriculture like its neighbors. When your country is essentially a vertical obstacle course, you learn to work with what you've got. That means nomadic herding, which brings us to one of the most mind-bending aspects of modern Kyrgyzstan: watching people balance ancient nomadic traditions with smartphones and social media. Right now, there are families packing up their entire lives into felt yurts and moving to summer pastures the way most people plan weekend camping trips. These aren't tourist attractions or historical reenactments. This is how thousands of Kyrgyz families actually live. Come May, you'll see convoys of trucks loaded with yurt components, household goods, and livestock heading up into the mountains for the summer grazing season. But here's where it gets fascinating. These same nomadic families who are carrying on traditions that predate the Roman Empire are also scrolling through TikTok, running businesses on WhatsApp, and posting Instagram stories from pastures at 3,000 meters above sea level. The teenagers helping herd sheep in traditional felt coats are probably more connected to global culture than most suburban kids. In the cities, particularly Bishkek, this cultural balancing act creates some pretty surreal scenes. You'll see a grandmother in traditional Kyrgyz dress arguing with her granddaughter about skinny jeans, while both of them are equally fluent in Russian, Kyrgyz, and increasingly English. The generational gap isn't just about technology here, it's about fundamentally different worldviews coexisting in the same household. The hospitality culture in Kyrgyzstan operates on a level that would make Southern Americans seem standoffish. If you're invited into a Kyrgyz home, prepare to be fed until you physically cannot move, then fed some more just in case. Saying no to food or tea is considered roughly equivalent to insulting someone's mother, their ancestors, and their livestock all at once. The concept of just stopping by doesn't exist. Every visit becomes a multi-hour affair involving multiple courses and enough tea to float a small boat. This hospitality extends beyond just feeding guests into what anthropologists call radical generosity. Families who are living on what Americans would consider poverty wages will still insist on slaughtering their best sheep if honored guests arrive. It's not about showing off, it's about genuine belief that sharing what you have, regardless of how little that might be, is simply how civilized people behave. Village life operates on rhythms that haven't changed much in centuries. People wake up with the sun, work according to seasonal demands, and organize their social lives around extended family networks that can include hundreds of people. Everyone knows everyone's business, which sounds claustrophobic until you realize it also means everyone looks out for everyone. Crime rates in rural Kyrgyzstan are basically non-existent, not because of police presence, but because stealing from your neighbor means stealing from someone whose cousin is married to your aunt. The family structure here is both deeply traditional and surprisingly progressive. While men are still expected to be the primary breadwinners, women often run the household finances and make major family decisions. It's not uncommon to see husbands deferring to their wives on everything from business decisions to child rearing, even if they'd never admit it publicly. Young people face the classic rural dilemma: stay in the village and maintain traditional ways of life, or move to the cities for education and opportunities. Many try to split the difference, getting university degrees in Bishkek or even abroad, then returning to their home regions to start businesses or work in local government. This creates an interesting dynamic where ancient traditions get filtered through modern education and global awareness. The dating scene reflects these cultural tensions in fascinating ways. Traditional Kyrgyz culture is pretty conservative when it comes to relationships. Public displays of affection are still frowned upon, and many families expect to have significant input into their children's marriage choices. But younger generations, especially in cities, are increasingly following Western dating patterns while still respecting family expectations. This has created a unique courtship system where couples might be completely modern in their private interactions, texting constantly, going on dates, even living together, while maintaining traditional appearances in front of family and community. It's like everyone's agreed to an elaborate performance where ancient customs get honored in public while modern relationships develop in private. The result is some pretty hilarious contradictions. You'll meet couples who've been together for years but still pretend to be as just friends when visiting rural relatives. Or families who are perfectly fine with their daughter getting a PhD in engineering but lose their minds if she wants to travel alone to another city. Now, let's talk about food, because Kyrgyz cuisine is where nomadic practicality meets genuine culinary genius, even if it occasionally involves eating parts of animals you didn't know were edible. The national dish, beshbarmak, literally translates to 5 fingers, because traditionally you eat it with your hands. It's essentially boiled meat, usually mutton, beef, or horse, served over fresh noodles in a rich broth with onions. Sounds simple, but when it's prepared correctly, it's the kind of meal that makes you understand why nomads could survive harsh winters on this stuff. The meat situation in Kyrgyzstan takes some getting used to for Westerners. Horse meat isn't just eaten here, it's considered a delicacy. The sausage made from horse meat, called shuzhuk, is particularly prized and shows up at every major celebration. Before you start making faces, consider that horse meat is actually leaner and healthier than beef, and in a country where livestock represents wealth and survival, using every animal completely makes perfect sense. Plov, borrowed from Uzbek cuisine but thoroughly Kyrgyzified, appears at every gathering larger than 3 people. It's rice cooked with meat, carrots, and enough oil to lubricate a small engine. But somehow it works. The secret is in the preparation. Real plov takes hours to cook properly, with each ingredient added at precisely the right moment. Watching an expert plov cook work is like watching a conductor lead an orchestra, except the music is sizzling sounds and the audience gets fed at the end. The dairy situation here is next level. Kumys, fermented mare's milk that's slightly alcoholic and tastes like sour yogurt mixed with regret, is considered both a beverage and medicine. Locals swear by its health benefits, and there's actually some science backing up claims about its probiotic properties. But fair warning, your first sip of kumys is likely to be your last unless you've got an adventurous palate and a strong stomach. Tea culture in Kyrgyzstan is serious business. Not, I need my morning coffee serious, but this beverage is the foundation of civilization serious. The traditional tea service involves multiple rounds of progressively stronger tea, accompanied by bread, butter, honey, and jam. Refusing tea is like refusing oxygen. Technically possible, but why would you want to? Chaikhanas, traditional tea houses, serve as community centers, business meeting locations, and gossip distribution networks all rolled into one. These aren't trendy hipster cafes. They're usually simple spaces with low tables, cushions on the floor, and endless supplies of tea and conversation. Spending an afternoon in a proper chaikhana is like getting a crash course in local culture, politics, and family drama, all while consuming enough caffeine to power a small city. Street food in Bishkek offers some genuinely excellent bargains for adventurous eaters. Samsa, baked pastries filled with meat and onions, cost about 50 cents each and are filling enough to constitute a meal. Lagman, hand-pulled noodles in a hearty broth, runs about $2 for a portion that could feed a small army. The bread situation alone is worth the trip. Fresh naan from traditional ovens that tastes better than anything you'll find in fancy bakeries back home and costs pennies per loaf. The restaurant scene in major cities is evolving rapidly, with young chefs experimenting with traditional ingredients in modern preparations. You'll find places serving deconstructed beshbarmak alongside traditional versions, or fusion dishes that combine Korean influences, thanks to a significant Korean population, with local ingredients. These experimental restaurants offer excellent food at prices that would make Western diners weep with joy. But here's where we need to address the elephant in the room. Or rather, the question that's probably been floating around your head this entire time. What about the women? Social media has created this mystique around Central Asian women, and Kyrgyzstan definitely contributes to that reputation. But the reality is more complex and interesting than the stereotypes suggest. Kyrgyz women are genuinely striking. There's a genetic lottery situation happening here involving Turkic, Mongol, and Persian influences that frequently produces the kind of bone structure that launches modeling careers. The traditional dress does not hurt either. Those elaborate braided hairstyles and embroidered clothes create a look that's both elegant and distinctive. But reducing Kyrgyz women to their appearance misses the more fascinating cultural story. Women in Kyrgyzstan occupy an interesting position between traditional expectations and modern opportunities. The Soviet period actually advanced women's rights significantly. Female literacy became universal. Women entered professions traditionally dominated by men, and legal equality was established. Post-independence brought some conservative backlash, but the foundations remained strong. Today, as Kyrgyz women are likely to be highly educated. The country has one of the highest female enrollment rates in higher education in the region. They're doctors, teachers, lawyers, business owners, and politicians. The current mayor of Bishkek is a woman, and female judges and government officials aren't unusual. But traditional expectations still exert significant influence, especially regarding family roles and relationships. Most Kyrgyz women still expect to marry and have children, and extended families often have strong opinions about appropriate behavior. This creates interesting negotiations between personal ambitions and cultural expectations that play out differently for each individual. The dating culture reflects these tensions. Foreign men often find Kyrgyz women appealing not just for their looks, but for their combination of education, traditional values, and genuine warmth. However, successful relationships require understanding and respecting the cultural context. This is not Thailand or the Philippines, where economic disparities create specific dynamics. Kyrgyz women who date foreigners often face family pressure and social judgment. So these relationships require genuine commitment and cultural sensitivity. The men who do best here are those who show genuine interest in learning the culture, learning some Russian or Kyrgyz, and demonstrating serious intentions rather than treating the country as some kind of dating playground. The traditional fashion is experiencing a renaissance among young women who are incorporating elements like embroidered vests and traditional jewelry into modern outfits. Walking around Bishkek, you'll see young women seamlessly blending contemporary styles with traditional accessories in ways that look effortlessly cool. Marriage customs remain fairly traditional, with elaborate celebrations that can involve hundreds of guests and last for days. The bride price tradition still exists, though it's increasingly symbolic rather than economic. Modern couples often navigate between satisfying family expectations and their own preferences in ways that would make diplomatic negotiators proud. The festival calendar in Kyrgyzstan reads like someone designed it specifically to showcase the coolest aspects of nomadic culture while providing maximum entertainment value for spectators. Nowruz, the spring equinox celebration borrowed from Persian traditions, marks the new year with festivities that make New Year's Eve look like a quiet dinner party. During Nowruz, entire communities come together for massive outdoor celebrations featuring traditional music, dancing, and enough food to feed several small countries. The horse games during this festival provide a preview of the more intense competitions that happen throughout the year. Watching Kyrgyz horsemen compete in traditional games is like seeing what cavalry charges must have looked like, except these guys are doing it for sport rather than conquest. Kok-boru, the traditional game that involves teams of horsemen competing to place a goat carcass in the opposing team's goal, sounds absolutely insane until you see it in person. Then it sounds even more insane, but also incredibly impressive. These are not gentle polo ponies and recreational riders. We're talking about horses and men who've been training for this their entire lives, playing a game that requires the kind of horsemanship skills that disappeared from most of the world centuries ago. The World Nomad Games, held every 2 years near Issyk-Kul Lake, have turned traditional Central Asian sports into international spectacles. Countries send teams to compete in everything from eagle hunting demonstrations to traditional wrestling styles you've never heard of. It's like the Olympics, except more violent and with more horses. Eagle hunting festivals showcase skills that most people assumed were extinct. These aren't trained circus birds. These are wild golden eagles that hunters capture, train for a few seasons, then release back into the wild. The hunting demonstrations involve eagles diving from cliffs to catch prey, while their handlers control them with nothing more than calls and gestures developed over generations. Traditional wrestling, archery on horseback, and various horse racing competitions provide non-stop entertainment for anyone who enjoys watching humans do things that seem physically impossible. The skill level is genuinely world-class. Many of these competitors could probably transition to professional sports if their traditional games had professional leagues. Wedding celebrations can last for weeks and involve entire communities. Traditional Kyrgyz weddings include horse racing, competitive singing, elaborate costume changes, and enough communal cooking to supply a small restaurant. Foreign guests at these celebrations often find themselves recruited as honorary family members for the duration of the festivities. The seasonal migration festivals, where nomadic families celebrate their moves to summer pastures, offer glimpses into lifestyle patterns that haven't changed significantly in a millennium. These are not tourist shows. They're genuine community celebrations of events that still matter for people as actual lives. Religious festivals blend Islamic traditions with older shamanistic practices in ways that create unique celebrations found nowhere else. The result is a festival calendar that provides almost constant opportunities to witness traditions that exist nowhere else in quite the same form. Now, let's talk numbers, because this is where Kyrgyzstan goes from interesting to absolutely mind-blowing for anyone tired of spending their entire paycheck on basic survival. The magic number everyone talks about is $500 per month, and it's not just some theoretical minimum. It's actually a comfortable living standard if you know what you're doing. Accommodation is where the savings really add up. A decent apartment in Bishkek runs between $100 and $200 per month, depending on location and amenities. We're talking about real apartments with heat, running water, and internet, not hostels or shared rooms. Outside the capital, those prices drop even further. A nice place in smaller cities might cost $60 to $80 monthly. For the truly adventurous, guest houses and homestays in rural areas cost $15 to $25 per night, including meals. These aren't budget accommodations. They're often family compounds where you get your own room, 3 meals daily, and more hospitality than most 5-star hotels provide. Food costs are genuinely ridiculous by Western standards. A substantial meal in a local restaurant runs $2 to $4. Street food costs even less. Those samsa pastries that constitute a complete meal cost about 50 cents each. Grocery shopping for a week might cost $15 to $20 if you're buying local products and cooking at home. Local transportation is practically free. Marshrutka, the shared minibuses that connect everything to everything else, cost about 30 cents for trips within cities and maybe $5 for intercity journeys that last several hours. These aren't luxury coaches, but they're reliable, frequent, and staffed by drivers who apparently learned their skills from action movie stunt coordinators. Taxis in cities run about $2 to $3 for trips across town. Long-distance shared taxis, which operate on fixed routes between major cities, cost surprisingly little for the convenience they provide. A shared taxi from Bishkek to Issyk-Kul Lake, A journey of several hours through mountain scenery costs about $10. Entertainment and activities fall into the almost free category. Museum admissions cost $1 or $2. Concert tickets for local performances run $5 to $10. Even guided tours for major attractions often cost less than $20 per person for full-day experiences. The catch, and there's always a catch, involves understanding the two-tier economy that exists in many developing countries. Locals live comfortably on incomes that seem impossibly low because they have access to informal networks, family support systems, and local knowledge that allow them to navigate costs that don't show up in guidebooks. Foreigners often end up paying tourist taxes, not official fees, but the higher prices that result from not knowing local customs, language barriers, and being obvious outsiders. Learning basic Russian or Kyrgyz phrases, understanding local customs, and developing relationships with locals can significantly reduce these additional costs. Healthcare represents both an opportunity and a risk. Basic medical care costs very little. A doctor's visit might cost $5 to $10, and prescription medications are significantly cheaper than Western prices. However, the quality can be inconsistent, and serious medical issues might require evacuation to countries with better healthcare systems. Utilities in most apartments run $20 to $40 monthly for heat, electricity, water, and internet. Internet speeds are actually quite good in urban areas, making digital nomad lifestyles feasible for people whose work doesn't require being physically present in expensive Western cities. The hidden costs that catch people off guard include warm clothing for winter weather that makes Minnesota look tropical, occasional visa runs if you're staying long-term, and the psychological cost of being far from familiar support systems during difficult times. For context, $500 monthly in Kyrgyzstan provides a lifestyle roughly equivalent to what might cost $3,000 in a major Western city. Decent housing, good food, reliable transportation, entertainment options, and enough left over for travel and savings. Getting around Kyrgyzstan requires a sense of humor, a strong stomach, and occasionally, a willingness to question your life choices. The transportation system operates on principles that seem to defy both physics and common sense, but somehow everyone gets where they need to go, eventually. Marshrutka form the backbone of public transportation, and riding them is like participating in a mobile sociology experiment. These are typically Soviet-era vans that have been modified to carry as many people as physically possible, then loaded with a few more just to be sure. The seating arrangements follow rules known only to the drivers, who apparently studied advanced Tetris theory in transportation school. A typical marshrutka journey involves strategic positioning to avoid being crushed by bags of potatoes, livestock, or other passengers, while the driver navigates mountain roads at speeds that suggest either supreme confidence or complete indifference to mortality. The entertainment comes from watching how passengers arrange themselves to accommodate everything from live chickens to construction materials, all while maintaining polite conversation. Intercity marshrutkas operate on schedules that exist more as suggestions than commitments. The posted departure time represents when the driver might start thinking about leaving, if enough passengers show up, and if nothing more interesting happens in the meantime. This flexibility requires adjusting expectations about punctuality, but it also creates opportunities for spontaneous conversations and unexpected adventures. Shared taxis offer a faster, slightly more comfortable alternative for longer journeys. These operate on fixed routes between major cities and leave when they have enough passengers to make the trip profitable. The advantage is speed and efficiency. The disadvantage is sharing close quarters with strangers for several hours while traversing mountain passes that occasionally feature road conditions that make video games seem realistic. Private transportation ranges from reasonable to expensive, depending on distance and destination. Hiring a car and driver for day trips around Issyk-Kul or to mountain destinations costs about $50 to $80, which becomes quite reasonable when split among several people. These drivers often serve as impromptu tour guides, providing local knowledge and cultural context that makes the journey more valuable than the destination. The road conditions themselves deserve special mention. Kyrgyzstan's highway system was designed by optimists who apparently believed that mountains would eventually flatten themselves through sheer force of wishful thinking. The main highways are generally decent, but secondary roads can deteriorate from passable to theoretical concept within the space of a few kilometers. Winter driving requires either tremendous skill or tremendous luck, preferably both. Mountain passes that are merely challenging in summer become genuinely dangerous when covered with ice and snow. Many roads simply close during winter months, turning travel planning into a seasonal activity. Domestic flights exist but are limited and expensive relative to ground transportation. The main airport in Bishkek connects to a few regional destinations, but most travel within the country happens by road simply because there aren't alternatives. Walking in cities is pleasant and safe, though sidewalk quality varies significantly. Bishkek is quite walkable, with tree-lined streets and reasonable urban planning. Smaller cities often lack proper sidewalks but make up for it with generally light traffic and friendly locals willing to provide directions. Hitchhiking remains a viable transportation option in rural areas where public transportation is limited. The combination of sparse traffic and genuine hospitality means that extended waits are common, but rides, when they materialize, often include invitations for meals and cultural exchanges that turn transportation into tourism. The key to successful transportation in Kyrgyzstan is flexibility, patience, and a willingness to treat delays and unexpected route changes as opportunities rather than problems. The journey often becomes more memorable than the destination, especially when it involves interactions with locals who are genuinely curious about foreign visitors. Nature in Kyrgyzstan operates on a scale designed to make humans feel appropriately humble about their place in the universe. This isn't gentle countryside where you take pleasant walks and admire wildflowers. This is landscape that requires serious respect and preparation, but rewards those efforts with experiences that redefine what you thought outdoor adventure meant. Issyk-Kul Lake anchors the northern tourism region with beaches that would be world famous if they weren't located in a landlocked country most people can't pronounce. The water stays warm enough for swimming from June through September, creating a surreal experience of lounging on beaches while snow-capped peaks provide the backdrop. The lake's size and salinity create weather patterns that keep temperatures moderate even at altitude. The southern shore offers more dramatic scenery and fewer crowds, with opportunities for hiking into valleys that see maybe a dozen visitors per year. These aren't well-marked trails with visitor centers and gift shops. They're routes that local shepherds use, requiring navigation skills and self-sufficiency. The payoff includes pristine alpine lakes, glacier-fed waterfalls, and wildlife that hasn't learned to be afraid of humans. Song-Kul Lake represents a completely different type of natural experience. Getting there requires either helicopter access or a long, rough drive through mountain passes that test both vehicle and driver capabilities. Once there, you're essentially on an island in the sky, surrounded by nothing but lake, mountains, and endless sky. The Archa Gorge, just outside Bishkek, provides accessible mountain experiences for people who want dramatic scenery without committing to multi-day expeditions. Day hikes here range from gentle walks suitable for families to technical climbs that challenge experienced mountaineers. The proximity to the capital makes it popular with locals, creating opportunities to observe how Kyrgyz families approach outdoor recreation. Trekking opportunities exist at every skill level, from day walks through shepherd villages to multi-week expeditions that cross mountain ranges and require serious mountaineering skills. The classic trek to Issyk-Kul Lake involves 3 to 4 days of hiking through terrain that changes from forest to alpine meadows to bare rock and glacial landscapes. Horse trekking allows access to areas that would be nearly impossible to reach on foot, while traveling in the traditional style that makes sense for this landscape. Local horses are sturdy, sure-footed animals bred for mountain conditions, and the horsemen who guide these trips possess skills that seem to come from a different century. Winter sports infrastructure is developing rapidly around the Karakol area, with ski resorts that offer genuine powder skiing at prices that make European and American ski areas look like highway robbery. The season runs from December through April, with conditions that vary from absolutely perfect to character building. Rock climbing and mountaineering opportunities exist for serious alpinists, with routes that remain largely unexplored by international standards. The combination of challenging terrain and minimal crowds appeals to climbers looking for genuine adventure rather than social media opportunities. Wildlife viewing requires patience and local knowledge, but the payoffs include seeing snow leopards, Marco Polo sheep, and other species that exist in few other places. The best wildlife experiences often happen spontaneously during other activities rather than on dedicated wildlife tours. Hot springs scattered throughout the mountain regions provide natural recovery and relaxation opportunities after days of hiking or climbing. These range from developed resort facilities to completely natural pools that require local knowledge to find. The adventure tourism infrastructure is developing rapidly, with local companies offering everything from basic guided hikes to complex multi-activity expeditions. The quality varies significantly, making research and recommendations essential for ensuring safe, enjoyable experiences. Safety in Kyrgyzstan presents a fascinating paradox. You're statistically safer here than in most Western countries, but the type of safety challenges are completely different from what most travelers expect. Understanding this distinction is crucial for having positive experiences rather than unnecessary anxiety. Personal safety in terms of crime is genuinely excellent. Violent crime rates are extremely low, especially crimes targeting tourists. The cultural values around hospitality and respect for guests create an environment where harming visitors would bring shame on entire communities. Petty theft exists, particularly in busy markets and transportation hubs, but it's less common than in most tourist destinations. The safety challenges that do exist tend to involve natural hazards and infrastructure limitations rather than human threats. Mountain weather can change rapidly and dramatically, turning pleasant hiking conditions into life-threatening situations for unprepared travelers. Altitude sickness affects many visitors who ascend too quickly to high-altitude destinations without proper acclimatization. Road safety represents the most significant risk for most travelers. Mountain roads, combined with aggressive driving styles and variable vehicle maintenance, create genuine hazards. The fatality rate from traffic accidents is significantly higher than in developed countries, making transportation choices an important safety consideration. Women traveling alone generally report feeling safe and respected, though cultural sensitivity regarding appropriate dress and behavior is important, especially in rural areas and during religious periods. The combination of traditional values and genuine hospitality creates an environment where solo female travelers are often looked after by local families and communities. Healthcare quality varies dramatically between urban and rural areas. Bishkek and other major cities have medical facilities that can handle routine problems and minor emergencies adequately. However, serious medical issues, complex procedures, or conditions requiring specialized care might necessitate medical evacuation to countries with more advanced healthcare systems. Emergency services exist but may not meet Western standards for response times or capabilities, particularly in remote areas. Cell phone coverage is generally good in populated areas but can be spotty or non-existent in mountains and rural regions, making communication during emergencies challenging. Natural disasters, particularly earthquakes and avalanches, represent low probability but high impact risks. The region sits on active fault lines, and seismic activity is not uncommon. Avalanche risks are significant in mountain areas during winter and spring, making local knowledge and proper equipment essential for backcountry activities. Water safety requires attention, as tap water quality varies significantly by location and season. Bottled water is widely available and inexpensive, making it the safest option for most travelers. Food safety is generally good in established restaurants and hotels, but street food and rural dining require some caution. Political stability has improved significantly in recent years, though the country has experienced periodic unrest. Staying informed about current political situations and avoiding demonstrations or large gatherings represents prudent caution rather than serious concern. Travel insurance that includes medical evacuation coverage is strongly recommended, as the cost of emergency medical transport from remote areas can be substantial. Many standard travel insurance policies don't adequately cover activities like mountaineering, horseback riding, or other adventure sports common in Kyrgyzstan. The combination of low crime rates, genuine hospitality, and spectacular natural environments makes Kyrgyzstan safer than many travelers expect. But the safety challenges that do exist require different types of preparation and awareness than typical tourist destinations demand. Practical matters like visas, money, and communication in Kyrgyzstan are surprisingly straightforward once you understand the systems, though they operate according to logic that sometimes seems designed by people who never expected foreign visitors to actually show up. Visa requirements are genuinely tourist-friendly for most nationalities. Citizens of many countries, including the United States, European Union nations, and others, receive 60-day visa-free entry stamps at arrival. This applies to both airport arrivals and overland border crossings, making spontaneous travel decisions possible without advance planning. The visa-free period can be extended by simply leaving the country and returning, though extended stays require proper visa applications. For people planning longer visits or multiple trips, the e-visa system allows online applications for various visa types with processing times of several days to a few weeks. Currency situations involve some complexity that reflects the country's position between different economic systems. The Kyrgyz som is the official currency, but US dollars and Russian rubles are widely accepted, especially for larger transactions or in tourist-oriented businesses. ATMs are common in cities but rare in rural areas, making cash planning essential for extended travel. Credit cards work in major hotels, restaurants, and shops in cities, but cash remains king for most transactions. The exchange rates tend to be better for US dollars than for other currencies, and carrying small denomination bills makes transactions smoother. Internet connectivity is surprisingly good in urban areas, with widespread Wi-Fi availability and decent mobile data speeds. Many cafes, hotels, and guest houses offer free internet access. Mobile SIM cards are inexpensive and easy to obtain with passport identification, providing good connectivity for communication and navigation. Language barriers exist but are manageable with basic preparation. Russian serves as the lingua franca and is understood throughout the country, making basic Russian phrases extremely useful. English is increasingly common among younger people in cities, but remains limited in rural areas. Kyrgyz is the official language and demonstrates respect for local culture, though few foreigners manage more than basic greetings. Turkish speakers often find Kyrgyz somewhat comprehensible due to linguistic similarities, creating unexpected communication opportunities. Shopping and bargaining customs follow patterns common throughout Central Asia. Fixed prices are normal in modern shops and restaurants, but bargaining is expected in bazaars and for services like transportation or tours. The bargaining process is generally friendly and good-humored rather than aggressive. Tipping isn't traditionally expected, but is increasingly appreciated in tourist-oriented businesses. Rounding up restaurant bills or adding small tips for good service is becoming more common, especially in cities. Banking services are available but can be slow and bureaucratic for complex transactions. International money transfers are possible, but may involve multiple visits to banks and patience with procedures that seem designed to test your commitment to completing transactions. Weather planning requires understanding that Kyrgyzstan experiences genuine continental climate extremes. Summers can be hot and dry, while winters bring temperatures that make polar explorers look underdressed. Spring and fall offer pleasant weather but can change rapidly. Packing for Kyrgyzstan needs to account for dramatic temperature variations, both daily and seasonal. Layers, warm clothing, and sturdy footwear are essential regardless of travel season. Even summer trips to high-altitude areas require warm clothes for evening and early morning conditions. Time zones and business hours follow patterns that sometimes seem arbitrary. Banking hours, government offices, and some tourist services operate on schedules that may not align with traveler expectations, making planning and flexibility important. The combination of straightforward visa policies, reasonable costs, and improving infrastructure makes Kyrgyzstan accessible for independent travelers, while the cultural and natural attractions provide experiences that justify whatever minor inconveniences the logistics might involve. As we reach the end of this adventure through the last untamed corner of Central Asia, it's worth stepping back and considering what makes Kyrgyzstan so remarkable in our increasingly standardized world. This is not just another travel destination where you take photos and buy souvenirs. It's a place where ancient ways of life persist alongside modern realities, creating experiences that simply don't exist anywhere else. The people you meet here carry stories that bridge centuries of history, from nomadic traditions that predate written language to Soviet experiences that shaped entire generations, to the current reality of building a modern nation while preserving cultural identity. These are not museum pieces or tourist performances. They are living traditions practiced by people who see no contradiction between honoring their ancestors and embracing the future. The landscapes provide backdrops that make professional photographers weep with joy and amateur photographers give up in frustration, because no camera adequately captures the scale and beauty of mountains that stretch beyond horizons, lakes that reflect infinity, and valleys where time seems negotiable. This is nature at a scale that reminds humans of our proper place in the universe while simultaneously inspiring us to explore our own capabilities. The economic realities mean that adventures that would cost thousands of dollars elsewhere become accessible to anyone with modest resources and a willingness to embrace experiences outside their comfort zone. For the price of a weekend in most Western cities, you can spend weeks exploring landscapes and cultures that exist nowhere else on Earth. But perhaps most importantly, Kyrgyzstan represents something increasingly rare in our connected world: genuine authenticity. This isn't a place that has been packaged and marketed for tourist consumption. The hospitality is real. The traditions are functional rather than performative, and the adventures are actual adventures rather than carefully controlled experiences designed for social media. The challenges are real too. The infrastructure limitations, the language barriers, the altitude, the weather, the distances between everything. But these challenges are also part of what makes the experiences meaningful rather than merely comfortable. For anyone tired of traveling to places that feel like theme park versions of themselves, where every experience has been focus grouped and optimized for maximum efficiency and minimum risk, Kyrgyzstan offers something different. It offers the chance to travel the way people did before travel became an industry, with genuine uncertainty about what you'll find, real interactions with people whose lives are completely different from your own, and experiences that change your perspective rather than just filling your photo gallery. The women are indeed beautiful, the mountains are indeed spectacular, the costs are indeed low, and the culture is indeed fascinating. But beyond all of that, Kyrgyzstan offers something much more valuable: the opportunity to step outside the increasingly narrow boundaries of modern life and remember what adventure actually feels like. Whether you come for the eagle hunters, the nomadic lifestyle, the natural beauty, or simply because you're curious about a place that most people can't locate on a map, Kyrgyzstan will provide experiences that remind you why travel used to be called adventure rather than vacation. So here's your challenge. The next time someone asks you about your travel plans, instead of mentioning the same destinations everyone talks about, tell them you're going to Kyrgyzstan. Watch their faces as they try to figure out where that is and why you'd want to go there. Then, after you've been there, Watch their faces again when you try to explain what you experienced. Because some places can't be explained. They can only be experienced. And Kyrgyzstan, the last wild card of Central Asia, remains one of those places where the experience is bigger than the explanation, where the reality exceeds the expectations, and where the adventure begins the moment you stop trying to plan everything and start allowing yourself to be surprised. The flight to Bishkek is waiting. The mountains are calling. The adventure is real. And Kyrgyzstan is ready to show you what authentic travel actually means. One impossibly beautiful, perfectly imperfect, completely unforgettable experience at a time.